Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I don't know where you are tuning in from the world today, but I got to make sure that I greet you in every which way of the day that you could be meeting me here with. And of course, in the background tonight, we have Calabash playing in the background, some Caribbean jazz. It's beautiful in Toronto, and I hope it's beautiful wherever you are. And it's not always about the weather, it's about your state of mind. So before we get started, I invite you to get comfy, get yourself a nice drink. It's hot out here in Toronto now, finally. So we no longer need a throw, but we need something cool and refreshing. And grab a notepad. You never know when we are going to share some knowledge, some wisdom for yourself and wisdom for someone else. As you know, sharing is caring. And so, welcome to Victory Speaks. It's Wellness Wednesday. It's the Minding Our Mind series. And at Victory Speaks, we talk about it's where iron sharpens iron, and that's you and me sharpening each other. I am your host, Nicole Waldron, your voice of victory and your mental fitness coach. And folks, I'm on a mission. I'm really on a mission to inspire you to live a life of victory, a victorious lifestyle. You all know we need to cultivate that victory mindset as we mind our mind. And remembering that victory is not about it's not a sprint. It's not about crossing that finish line first. It's about crossing the finish line as your best self, no matter what that looks like every day, just doing one little bit. And that's what, for me, victory is all about. And throughout time, I have been having many conversations. I'm getting older, even though I think I'm, looking younger. And, these conversations I've had with people through the different spheres of my life have inspired me. And some of them have been good. Some of them have been sad. Some of them have been a little ugly, but it's okay. You can always find something to inspire you and make you a better person. And so we are just wrapping up anniversary week of the Victory Speak show of 1 year, started in 2020. And tonight we are having the second part two of this conversation in Mental Health Month. And you will hear some more of the voices and stories of families, caregivers, of loved ones with addictions and other mental health conditions. This is a conversation, folks, for everyone. So share, share, share. Now, addiction is not easy to talk about or deal with. Most people struggling with addiction never receive treatment. And for those who do, it is often only after they've hit rock bottom. And I hate to say that. And it doesn't have to be this way. The question then becomes, for many, do families matter in the care of their loved ones when it comes to mental health and addiction? There are many topics of concern: consent, capacity, involuntary treatment, intervention, the role of the family. There's things like secondary decision makers, community treatment orders, medication, alternative care, transitional care. There's so much to this conversation, but we can't cover it all in one show. But I want you to know that some of the things that we are thinking about as we're, doing this series. So my guests tonight, I have four amazing individuals that are sharing the Victory Speaks platform with me tonight. And I'll start with Angie Hamilton, is a retired lawyer, the executive director and co-founder of Families for Addiction Recovery, and the parent of a child who struggles with addiction. Angie is a member of the Public Policy Committee of the Canadian Society of Addiction Medicine and a board member of the Ontario Family Caregivers Advisory Network. She was a member of the National Board of MAD Canada from 2014 to 2020 and the chair of their Public Policy Committee. We also have Sydney Graham, who has worked in the healthcare field for over 27 years. Her expertise is in teaching both providers and patients, and along with families, how to effectively partner for better equality and safety and improved outcomes and efficiencies. She has worked with hospitals, government agencies, community care, academia, research, nonprofit, and with patients and families. She is passionate about system change in the mental health and addictions field and creating better partnerships, enabling families to be participants, and co-designers of care. She is currently a peer support manager and educator at Families for Addiction Recovery, and the acronym you'll hear us use the name is FAR. She's a board member of Ontario Family Caregivers Advisory Board, and I mentioned that with Angie before, and the acronym for that is OFCAN. She is also an advisory member on the Global Patient and Family Advisory Board and Director of Engagement and Mental Health Integrity Healthcare Consultants. Sydney is also a practitioner, has a practitioner certificate in cognitive behavioral therapy, and many refer to it as CBT, and dialectic behavioral therapy, which is called DBT. So those are just some of the acronyms that you will hear. Tonight, also joining us, I have two moms. Kathryn Eve is an addiction and mental health specialist living in Greater Toronto area with her spouse and son. She is the founder of Make Peace International, MPI, a creative agency that uses the arts to promote peace and human rights. Under MPI, Kathryn produced a CD entitled Crosses Are Burning, which aired to over 1 million listeners on Breakpoint Radio in the United States. As an established artist, she also performed the national anthem before an audience of 30,000 plus people for the Toronto Raptors basketball team and the Toronto's Blue Jays club. And she is also holding a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology and English and a Master of Arts degree in international relations. She's also a spiritual director at International. No, sorry, she's a member of Spiritual Directors International and a member of ACTRA and SOCAN. She's also an author. Mom, I don't know where you are finding the energy to do all this. Oh my goodness. Tammy Gould is she is a well thought of and admired business owner of local businesses for 27 years. She's the mom of two boys, one biological and one adoptive. She's the adoptive mother of Marcus William Mason Gould, and you'll hear about him tonight. And she is joining us and she has agreed to have this conversation. So let's get started. And I want to give them a warm Victory Speaks welcome. You guys join me with applause, with everything, your hearts, your everything else, because I'm going to bring them up to the Victory Speaks stage. Woo! We got to show you some love tonight. We got to show you some love tonight. We got to show you some love tonight. You know, it's virtual, so we got to keep it hype. I got to bring my hype men in there because, we need to be celebrated and loved on, and, So, my new friends and old friends, I welcome you to the Victory Speak show. And so let's start with you, Sydney. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing just great. Really happy to be here joining you and being in the company of such incredible people.
Thank you. And Angie, how are you doing on this day today?
I'm great, and I'm grateful to be here and, for you giving us the opportunity to share our stories and advocate for change that we need. Thank you so much, Nicole.
You're welcome. Tammy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Nervous. Can't hear much, but nervous, but I'm thankful to be here too, to say, share the story that is Marthy's passing and move and hopefully teach other people about it as well.
I'm so grateful for you being here. And try not to be nervous. I promise I won't bite. I'll be okay. And Kathryn, how are you doing today?
Yeah.
Well, as they say in recovery circles, just shy of fabulous.
Yeah.
Ooh, just shy of fabulous. I've never heard that, but I kind of like that. I'm going to steal that. Just shy of fabulous. I think we should all use that. Just shy of fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Angie said we're in a national health crisis. I was listening to different people talking over the last little while due to the pandemic, and they're saying this national health crisis has to deal with the opioid use. And I was kind of like, really? Is it really new? Or is it now just being amplified? What are your thoughts on this when it comes to this national health crisis that is now on everybody's mind?
Well, it's just been amplified. It's been here for a long time. Fentanyl really changed things, and fentanyl has been around probably for at least 10 years. So it's not new. It's just the pandemic has made everything worse.
Okay, that makes sense now. That really makes sense. And Sydney, being in the hospital and working in the field, how have you seen the pandemic change the lives of people right now?
Well, it's really changed the lives of everybody, because no matter what your health situation or non-health situation, everybody is feeling traumatized. And this is a really difficult situation to go through. Anybody that is dealing with some kind of mental health issue, addictions, it's just that's amplified too, and it's making it a lot worse. So services were almost impossible to get before, and it makes it even more difficult now to access these kinds of services because there's just so many people looking.
That's really, really hard to hear. And when we talk about mental health and addiction, and I want to dispel some of the myths before we get into talking with Kathryn and Tammy. Angie, people like to separate mental health and addiction as two separate things. Well, how really should we frame this talk around mental health and addictions?
Well, it's the rule that people who are struggling with an addiction also have co-occurring disorders. It's not the exception to the rule.
Mm.
And particularly if there's early onset for addiction, then it's even greater chance, like it's up to like 70% chance that there's a co-occurring condition.
And so when you say co-current, what do you mean?
So that's a mental health condition other than addiction. So anxiety, depression, ADHD, a PTSD.
Okay, I get it now. I think I get it a little bit better now. And so when we start thinking about it, and what would you say, Sydney and Angie, when it comes to what are the conditions that say are mental health? What's a mental illness? Like, is it just depression? Is it just anxiety? What are some of the illnesses that we should really know about as we start getting into this conversation?
So, I think, well, in terms of addiction, it's, there are changes in the brain that with repeat use of substances, whether it's alcohol or other drugs, because people sometimes forget that alcohol is a drug. Anxiety, depression, it's when when it elevates to a level where it's an actual disorder, it's having an effect on your life. We all are anxious at times. We're all, unhappy at times. That doesn't mean, we have clinical anxiety and depression. So it's like, mental health it's on a continuum, right?
Right. And so on the continuum, we're talking about, so where does bipolar and schizophrenia fit in then?
Well, they're considered serious mental illnesses. So, but what I would say about bipolar is recently I found out that the average length of time between when somebody first starts to exhibit symptoms of bipolar and the time that they're diagnosed is about 12.4 years.
What?
12.4 years. So it's well, and the reason for that is because it's depression together with mania. So mania is sort of like when you think you can do anything, you're invincible.
Yes.
15 projects at one time thing. So a lot of people have the depression for a period of time, but it can take a while for the mania to show up. That's why it takes so long. But my point is this: like, people can start self-medicating. They often self-medicate when they don't feel right. Because they find it comforting. They get, people use substances for a reason.
Right.
And at first it makes them feel better, and it can take a long time before they get to a point where it's worse for them than not using it, and it could take a while after that before they actually realize that themselves.
Now, folks doing some really intricate work, and Sydney, you've been in this field for so long, 27 years. You've been in the health field, the mental health field. What is the difference that we need to know in terms of when somebody has a mental health and addiction? What's the difference that is happening in terms of treatment and the approach that I guess the medical community and society at large takes to them?
Yeah, there is a big difference. And that's, one of the big reasons I'm so passionate about doing a lot of work in the mental health, because I have 3 boys. And I sort of started in the healthcare system because one was born with a facial defect. And the care that I got was amazing. as a caregiver, and they did a terrific job looking after my son. And I was a huge participant in his care. And it makes a really big difference. Moving forward, sort of out of that pediatric realm, I was looking after my parents in the cancer field.
Right.
And they too were very collaborative. You know, I could be a participant. They listened to my advice. They asked for my perspective on things that were happening in the home. So again, it's very collaborative and open. And then, you know, you find out about what happens in the mental health and addictions field. Nothing is aligning in that way. It's a very different way that they see family involvement, which is really key. And I think stigma has a lot to do with that. So it does make it more challenging. It doesn't mean it's impossible, but it does put up a lot of barriers for the families to seek the care and then to be a real participant, because we are the continuity of care. Families do know their children best. And so having our lens to add to what the providers are getting from the patients is only going to make decisions easier and finding better pathways for recovery for these people that are suffering.
Thank you so much for that. And we talk about people that are suffering, and what, Angie, you co-founded FAR with Louise. Why did you see the need to do this?
Oh, I think anybody who's been involved with the system for like 5 minutes would understand the answer to that.
Wow.
So it's just sometimes I feel like if you were designing a system honestly to harm people, this would be it. There's huge wait lists for anything. However, if you have money, you can usually get services a lot faster, which I think is wrong. If your child doesn't want help, no, but that's fine with everybody. They're okay with that, and that just doesn't fit right with all the advice about the importance of early intervention, because for all mental health conditions, I think, and also substance use disorder or addiction, the longer it goes on, the harder it is, and there's all kinds of other harms created from that, especially if youth are involved, because their brains haven't matured yet, and there's evidence that it affects the maturation of the brain. We wanted to make sure that there was treatment on demand. Nobody had to pay for it, that it was accessible, that it was compassionate. There's a tremendous amount of stigma, not just for, the person who's struggling, but also their family. And Sid was talking about that. It affects our ability to contribute, to their recovery. And so it just seemed like almost everything needed to change. And if I kind of thought actually that there would be less stigma on families. I was wrong about that, but that was a thought. So I thought it'll be easier for families to speak about this than perhaps the person with substance use disorder.
That's really good in the clarification, because it's so needed, and the fact that you even bring up about families, you thought that families would be treated differently. So let's talk about families, and I know we're going into a really deep part of the conversation, in the heart of the conversation, and I'm just so grateful and humble that you're both here tonight, Tammy and Kathryn. So, Kathryn, if we could start with you and your story a little bit, and you can share as much as you want to share. I've read your story, and you've been so transparent about your own personal journey as a woman, growing up as a teenager. So let's start some of the context as to your background and your history.
Sure. I grew up in the prairies, a family of 4 girls. My father was in recovery, so I was familiar with the recovery community and what it's like to live in a home that was alcohol and drug free. And I'm very grateful for that. But as we all know, there's that genetic component to addiction and other mental health issues that out of the 4 girls, I was the one that had that gene that when I picked up a substance, I could not stop from the start. I don't know what it's like to drink or use socially. Never have, never will. And so my parents being in the recovery movement were very much on the ball compared to most parents. My father detected very early on that I was not like other teenagers as a rite of passage. I had a problem. I overdosed very early on in my use. I wasn't an everyday user because I couldn't get access, but immediately it became problematic for me. And reflecting back on that, that was actually a gift in disguise because us aren't going to change unless there's consequences, right? Unless we feel the pain or the squeeze, we'll just keep carrying on in our insanity. And so I was pushed into involuntary treatment. And back then, you didn't need a minor's consent to get help. I think Angie and I had talked about this recently, that you can have an eating disorder and be put into involuntary treatment, but if you have a alcohol or drug problem, you aren't. And I don't understand that. It's irrational to me. So my parents basically saved my life. I went to treatment with no intention of stopping, even though I had a problem. But while I was in there, a seed got planted and something shifted in my consciousness. And it was tough going because it's tough as a young person to be alcohol and drug free. You've got to find a positive peer community to keep yourself safe and occupied. Otherwise, you go right back to the same old, same old. And I got involved in a recovery program, 12-step program. I'm not saying it's the only way, but to me, it's the easiest way because it's a community that heals.
Right.
So it's a day-by-day reprieve that I have from the obsession to drink or use by working my program. And that's different for everybody.
Yeah.
And also
you said something, Kathryn. Sorry to interrupt you. That struck me. You said at that time your parents could actually intervene.
Yeah.
So that's very different to now, is what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. My son is going to be 16 in 2 months, and the last 2 years have been absolute hell. We're living in constant fight or flight response, and I never thought in my wildest dreams that we would be going through this. So you just kind of go through the days holding your breath, praying when you can. And because I have a background in social work, I know how to work the maze of that system, it's a full-time job in itself. So I think we have done everything and beyond what we can to help him. But because of the legal roadblocks, we sent him to rehab. He ran away. We tried to encourage treatment. He'll start, then he'll stop. We try to get him into a hybrid education system to help him to make his learning process easier with his ADHD and learning challenges. And he'll go for a week, 2 weeks, and then stop. And there's no follow-up in terms of truancy or anything. So he basically rules the nest, but to his demise. And we're the parents in this hostage type of position, watching our son spiral before us because of a legal system that tells us we cannot protect him. And it reminds me of what a psychiatrist quoted. I can't remember where I heard it recently. And he said, when the civil liberty groups were crying out, saying you need to get in their rights to make their own choices, even though they don't have the capacity to make those choices when they're on the law. He talked about a case of a girl, and he said, well, she overdosed in an alleyway, but at least she held her rights.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, he was talking about a girl that actually had OD'd because she didn't want to go for treatment. So, hey, the civil rights groups are really happy about that. She has her rights, but she's not alive to have those rights. So what's the point of it?
So that's definitely, a conversation we need to talk about. And we may not be able to cover that tonight, but we need to put that in our memory bank, Sydney and Angie, about the rights and the activist groups that feel that rights are more important. I'll hide behind that, and loved ones are not able to get the help. So, Kathryn, I'm so sorry I interrupt you because you were telling your story and the fact that, your parents were able to get the help that you needed. So continue from there.
Yeah, just to segue into what you shared about rights. One thing I've learned very early on in life is you can't have rights without responsibility. You can't have freedom without form. You need both. And I often remind myself of that because he knows the system. These kids are so savvy.
Mhm.
They know how to deal with the police. They know how to, sideswipe around having to take responsibility for certain things. And he said to me one day, I have my rights. I said, you certainly do. But to maintain those rights, you require responsibility. And he looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language because it's like, no, my rights are my rights and it stops here. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. We are interdependent. We work together and we are still responsible for our choices.
And that's where, I think about capacity comes in, because when you can't be responsible, you really don't have the capacity. If we were to really talk about consent and capacity, how can you have capacity if you don't want to be responsible and you want to have all these rights? Okay, so we're moving on, and you're going through this, and you have been successful in your journey of dealing with which your parents were helping you get through and get the therapy that you needed. So let's continue with the story from there.
Yeah, so I mean, I work on a day-by-day basis. I
Right.
choose to be in recovery, and the longer I'm in recovery, the more I don't want to go back to that life. And I think if my parents hadn't made that decision against my will, I wouldn't be here on your show today to have this discussion. I know that for a fact. So I'm grateful that they did what they did. Not that treatment isn't an end in itself, it's a foundation for the journey. With my son, we're in a very difficult position with him. And, we said to me, we want you to stay in our home. You're a part of our family. And we have to add the adoptive piece with that. He's been with us since he was 8 months old. But there's only so much parents can take. I'm not going to get into all the details of just some of the struggles, but we have to be safe. And we have to keep ourselves above water. And I think the stress that we often don't talk about in our isolated experience because of the shame and the stigma with families, even from other members of the family, not meaning, but like, why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do that?
Yes.
You haven't walked in those shoes. And I've even made that error with other members of my family going through difficult times with their kids. And now I'm living it myself. They really don't have a concept of what it's like. I mean, the silent struggles, like my spouse felt an ulcer through this, and chunks of her hair is now falling out because of the chronic stress of what we deal with every day. And you don't want to get involved with the criminal justice system because it doesn't provide rehabilitation. Once they get lost in that system, quite often they don't get out, especially for racialized kids.
Yes.
So, and not that you want to enable them, but if they won't go for help, you're caught in this, what I call Dante's Inferno. Trying to find your way through the flames and come out not scorched on the other side. So I never give up hope, but we're taking it moment by moment, day by day. And I'll just say this one thing because I want to give Tammy a chance to share too. I try to look for those cracks of light where I see my old son that I remember, because right now I don't know who he is anymore. And that's a very frightening place to be. But every now and then I'll feel nudgings, what you call nudgings of the spirit, right? And the other night I went downstairs, he's watching TV, he hardly talk anymore. It's more grunts. He'll call out if he wants something. And I just very gently put my hand on his hand. And I kept it very short, and I just said, and I took a risk doing this. I just said, I just want you to know that I love you very much. And I am praying for you all the time. And I believe God has a special plan for your life. Now, my son identifies as agnostic. That's fine. We all find our own journey, but I believe that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And
Yes.
so he just looked at me and went, thank you. And then turned back and watched TV. And I just got up and I left. So again, to me, that's another seed planting, right? To let him know that even though he may be giving up on himself, I have the long view of how I see him. And God doesn't make junk, and God finishes what God starts in our lives.
This is the one part where I wish we were live together, in the same room, because what you're saying so resonates with me in so many ways, and I'm sure it resonates with so many parents. And we have to speak life no matter what we see. We have to walk by this hope And I think that's the one thing that you have to try as caregivers. You have to just keep this hope alive, and no matter what you see them going through, and what I heard you saying as well, that the son that you knew is different than the son that you see now, and but be cognizant that that person is still there, and you still have to share love, and you still have to share, you know all of these different things. And I like what you had to say, that the message to other parents of not judging, because we're so quick to judge and to think that we are doing something wrong, and then we feel this guilt, and the medical ways that we feel. So I thank you so much for sharing some of your story, Kathryn. I know your story is very robust, and so Tammy, um, I am so grateful to you coming tonight, and I know this is not easy. We're going to take it slow, and you take your time, and so what would you've started, in light of all that you've gone through, you've actually started like a charity, a foundation of sorts, advocating and doing advocacy, and out of this pain that you're experiencing. And I would love people to really know a little bit about you and Marky, if you don't mind sharing.
Can you hear me?
Oh, totally. I can hear
Okay.
you loud and clear.
I can't hear me, but that's okay. As long as you can.
I can hear you.
It's not a charity of sorts. It's just I'm a realtor too, so all of real estate will always go out and do charitable things. And it just kind of meshed well for me to do that for, the homeless, because Marky was homeless for a good bit of the time he was out there. So, last year we started the Marky Mattered page, which really doesn't do much, but it was a place for us to share information. And I just filled my car full of coats and hats and mitts and stuff for the homeless, but more to take it to the Salvation Army where they helped him. So it would kind of get back to the people who helped him while he was on the streets, right?
And so you said your son ended up on the streets, and he had a home but became homeless in a sense.
Yeah.
Would you be okay to share some of that, how that occurred?
Yeah. So Marcus was adopted. So he's our child from 13 months onward. I was his third mom. And so he had multiple diagnoses, and one of them was attachment disorder. He never really attached or bonded with anybody. He had ADHD, ADD, ODD, Asperger's, which is the big one. So
right.
ASD. And we think, because I found out later his parents had bipolar and schizophrenia, I think because both of those come out at the ages of teenage and up, 16 plus. And we think that he might have been starting to go into the more bipolar type, where he didn't care anymore, lost any sense of, caring what was happening or having hope in anything. And his being adopted might have made him feel hopeless too, because he kept saying on the streets that he was in a foster home. So he was kind of putting out a lot of communications, like you said, Kathryn and Sydney, that they can actually give a different picture of what they're living, and people will believe it. Police will believe it. So his story on the streets and in school was quite different than what he was living. And so we had him from 13 months until 7 years. I could not figure out what was wrong with him, what I was doing wrong. And it wasn't until I had my biological, and Marcus was 7 years old, I realized that I wasn't doing anything wrong, and we had him diagnosed. So from 7 years onward, he was on an IEP in school, assisted schooling, right? Needed that help. And he started playing football, which helped him greatly in being social, because Asperger's, they just are not social. So they did fit in.
Right.
And so he did fit in quite a bit with the football, and he managed to get through school quite well, we thought, with IEP. However, he went through a lot of bullying in football, some racial discrimination at one team. And then we didn't know at his recent team that he was going through some of it as well until the end. He did start playing on Team Ontario for a few years, where he went to Nova Scotia, and he played Team Canada Bowl, where he went to BC. And those are significant because that's times when he left home
Right.
for a week without no supervision. And it's at that time he was around teenagers of older ages. So 13-year-old amongst the U16s, which is up
Yeah.
to 16, right? Or 13-year-old around, or 16-year-old around the 18-year-olds, because Team Canada Bowl is up to 18. So he was around some of the influences he wouldn't normally be around.
Year round, right.
And we, after his Nova Scotia Team Ontario game, we found out that he had started trying marijuana there. And anyone who's read up on bipolar and just schizophrenia will also know that marijuana has THC in it.
Yes.
The TCH?
THC.
THC.
THC, yes.
And and that affects bipolar and schizophrenia huge. It has huge effect on them. So if he was doing marijuana, as his state of psychosis, then through the marijuana, and having bipolar with a mental disorder, he just would not be operating properly. And he eventually didn't care about football. He didn't care anymore. So when he came back from BC in 2019, the fall of 2019, we moved here, and he had come back from BC. He no longer cared about anything. He was very angered. He had been putting his fist through walls and just unapproachable.
So because he was in psychosis, he was going through psychosis.
I think so. We didn't realize, because we didn't know he was doing
what
that.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's very unapproachable, and usually he's quiet, as Asperger's is, quiet and laid back, not really aggressive. I don't care who says they're aggressive. They're not. Autistic is not aggressive.
Yeah.
Not that tight, not at that high functioning. So he wasn't the same kid when he came back. And then we found out that on social media, he had started sharing things. And I did warn him not to be so out there with his, private information. But he kept speaking to being confused about liking girls or boys. He always had girlfriends. And one of his best friends said he was going to curb stomp him, and that he was an F, the F.
Yeah.
Not cool, but it really hit him hard. And so you could see that he was like always stressed in his room, and he wouldn't come out and join the family. So he was very combative. And then family day, he took off on me. We got in an argument, and he actually told me to get out of his room, but not so nicely. And so we thought he was just going for a walk, and he went for a very long walk. He did not come back for 2 weeks, right? And we went and looked. I went to the police the day after he left, because I give him time to cool off at his friends, and he didn't come back. So we went to police, and they sent us to OPP. So 2 reports were done, and they both said he's 17, but that at 16 years old, they're legally, we should be announcing this, but they're within the right to be out on their own, and you can't do a thing about it. And
the 16-year-old, they know this. You can say it.
Yeah.
They know it, and they tell parents quite well.
They must.
Because they talk among themselves, right? So no, it's okay to say it. Yeah, they do.
So he knew that he was capable. At 16, they're allowed to be out there running around doing whatever. They're not allowed to drink, not allowed to do drugs, because they're not legally of age. 18's of age, right?
But you're allowed to go live on your own.
Exactly. And you're not allowed to leave school. I'm responsible to make sure he's in school. So I did hear from the school quite frequently, and got in heck quite a bit from them. Children's Aid called me and ripped me one because he was out there. And I was told that I'm financially responsible for him. It's my job to make sure he's in school. Yet I couldn't find him, and I couldn't get the police to help me find him for 5 months.
And this is something.
Yeah. And now COVID hit too.
Oh my God.
And with COVID, the school closed. First, he was in the warming room at the police station. So I knew where he was, and he was safe at night, right? But then COVID hit, and they kicked him out of the police station at 17 years old. And because the COVID was, they were putting the homeless in the school. and Marcus was too young to be homed in the school. So they left him on the street, or they had him bouncing around hotel to hotel, a 17-year-old boy in hotel rooms. So I couldn't find him. I didn't know where he was. No one would tell me where he was. We'd ask for health checks, and the cops would say all the time, no, he's fine. We saw him, a week or two ago, he's fine. Eventually, I was told I was just another mother venting by the police. So I wasn't getting anywhere. So I took it upon myself to start walking the creeks and rivers and looking for him, getting his friends to become friends on Facebook on a fake account that I made. And I would follow him that way, and then started to friend the homeless. And once I friended the homeless, I recognized their faces. So I went out on the streets and started talking to them on the streets and started to let them see that I'm still there. I'd go visit the school, talk to them, and ask about them. And believe it or not, the homeless are nothing compared to what people think they are.
Yeah.
They were more, oh my God, I've seen him last week. He's over here. Or it was the homeless who told me where to find him.
So they were more helpful to you than the authorities.
Yeah. Yeah. Children's Aid came on the scene for 21 days, and they left just as fast because Marky was refusing any of the help that Children's Aid was offering. He was refusing to talk to M. Hart because he did not like her. He did go to Greenwood Coalition and talk to them for a bit, but nobody was able to help him because he kept saying he's fine. But mentally, he didn't know if he was fine because he was on drugs. How does he know if he's fine? He clearly was not. I tried to get a mental health check done, and I was refused that as well. Yeah.
This right here, we will take a breath and husa, because this right here is what continues to make my blood boil.
Yeah.
To even hear you say this.
Yeah.
I'm not normally a violent person, but right now I want to punch someone.
How do you think I feel?
Yeah. I can only imagine, what it's like that individuals that are without a home and homeless on the street are more helpful to you, and you're going to the authorities. And I want everybody live and on the replay to hear what we're saying here tonight, that Tammy's son left home.
Mhm.
She's advocating for him, trying to get him help, being told no by the authorities on one side, and then being told that you're responsible on the other side.
Yeah.
And if you are friends with an MP, MPP, counselor, whatever you are right now, senator, you need to listen. If you're in the media, you really need to hear this. And if you guys think about this pandemic, this is why this pandemic, you want to talk about the stats about how we're in an opioid crisis and this is happening. I need you to hear what Tammy and Kathryn have been saying. And I need you to hear that Children's Aid in 21 days gave up. I need you to hear that Tammy said she asked for a mental health check and was told that her son that was unwell was okay. So, when we start talking about all sorts of stuff, I really need you to hear, because we're going to go in, because this is unacceptable on so many levels. Okay, I'm going to breathe again and let Tammy continue sharing. So you're there as a strong mother. You're tired, you're weary, you're in sorrow. You're trying to find your son.
Yeah. So he came home March 10th. The school closed because of COVID, and he came home. And he came home because he lost his bank card. He got defrauded by a homeless person who told him that if he put the $300 check in, he could take out $80 for the homeless person. He'd have the balance and could keep it. And Marcus, like I said, he was 17, but he was operating at the mentality of a 12-year-old. He always had to have something showing him, this is what you do and these are the steps you take. So he was not ready for that. And this person took advantage of him, lost his bank card. So he came home. He ate a lot in one night and he slept a lot. And then he was good to go. And then Friday he got up and he said, I'm just going to go hang with a friend tonight. That's okay. Just let us know. And he was supposed to come home. And he called me about 10 o'clock. So I'm going to stay here, but I'll come back in the morning. I never heard from him again, not until I found him again months later. So once I did do all the searching and I came across him with the homeless, it was only about Well, I found him on the Thursday and Friday of that week, and that was the week before he died. And the homeless guy told me where to go. And when I got there, I saw him. He ran. It was shame that he ran for,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But backing up a little bit before I go on with that is Children's Aid had been on the scene only for 21 days, and they neglected to tell me something that happened in April that should have been told to me about, an officer's comments about Marcus being that he met Marcus with another boy on the street, and that Marcus had seemed like he was, his verbiage, what he was saying was like he was in a state of psychosis. The story was unbelievable by the two of them, and they were in a
Right.
state of psychosis. That's a 17-year-old boy that this officer is stating he's seen face to face with Emhart, and he was in a state of psychosis. And he also stated that Marcus was blending and mixing with people on the street who he felt would or could be a problem in the future for Marcus, could cause him harm, is what he said. And that's something that should have been brought up to me as a parent,
Yes.
but nothing was brought up. It never was brought up. So I could never even look into that or even try harder to find him. So when I did find him, I still didn't know any of that. And I just thought the best thing for me to do when I do find him is try and start over with him, try and let him feel that whatever's happened to put him there isn't going to continue happening in his life. He doesn't have to worry about that. Get off of, football, get off whatever's doing
Yeah.
it to him. We'll start back. We'll get him whatever drugs he wants or needs to keep him going, whatever, right? So I pulled him over on the Friday, and he agreed to come reluctantly at first, but then he said, yeah, I'll go have lunch with you on Saturday. So I had lunch on Saturday, and we chatted for an hour. One of his friends came to the car, and I was talking with him, gave him some Gatorade and stuff, and we were chatting. And then he agreed again on the Sunday to come back out and have lunch in the park with me. And during that lunch, he had stated that, he said, Mom, I know I've done wrong. And, if you'd have asked me to go and do my test, a mental health test, I would have just gone and done it. So he was willing to be tested. And the thing I think too is that I kind of feel like he was sitting back waiting. I had no way of reaching him because he had no phone, like really.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like he was sitting there waiting for someone to reach out. And I think if they'd have just said, you know what, Marcus, instead of saying the parents are the enemy, like
Yes.
don't call the parents in. Oh no. Instead of bringing us together in a room and talking, they kept us separated like we were the enemy and he was the victim, and we weren't really doing anything to him to be treated like that. So for my son to be left out there waiting and wanting for someone to just put a hand out for him to say he'd take the help, that tells me that he was desperate to have the help. And I think that the need to fit in trumped everything else. So he just kept trying these drugs and doing these drugs to be in amongst the groups and fit in. And I think that, had we been allowed to be part of the situation to begin with, if the police had said, your son's running the streets, we might be able to work together and bring them in. Hello, that would have been perfect, but it wasn't. It didn't happen.
And it would have made sense because they're telling you on one hand that you are responsible, but not allowing you to be the responsible parent that you already were, because you show that just by even going. And I want people to really hear this, because there is this stigma that it's bad parenting and it's bad children and we're judging, and we need to stop that. And if you're here and this and and I can see by Sydney and Angie nodding, and from the little reader, this is not a one-off story. This is a continuous story that is happening over and over again. And I want you to really hear, if we miss telling you the year, this is happening in the year 2020 that we're
Marcus
talking about.
July 15th was the most deaths in 2020, and he was the youngest boy on the day of the most deaths in 2020. From opioid, not from COVID. Yeah.
Wow, Tammy. So the police were not helping you. He said to you, you were talking about you took him to lunch. And I remember, understanding that even when you were getting lunch for him that day and waiting in line, you
Mhm.
could feel the eyes judging
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
and
Marky
judging
was,
him.
yeah. He wasn't dressed like, well, I mean, he was homeless. He had been down 40 pounds, 40 kilos. If you were to look at him as a football player, that's Marcus as a football player. I don't even know if you're going to see it. How do
Just
I
hold
get
it
it
up
on
close.
here?
Yeah, there you go. Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He didn't look anything like that. As a homeless boy, it's on my phone, but he had a full beard, absolutely thin, thin, thin. And he was obviously dirty. So we were standing waiting for a sub, and he didn't notice it because Marquis was Marquis. He never really paid attention to do for anybody, right? So he didn't notice them. And I just wanted to turn around to parents and just teach them. Teach them that it's wrong, right? Because to comment about him being homeless when in fact he's not homeless, I have a beautiful home. It's just the choice that he made, and it's a wrong choice, but it's a
And the
choice.
choice that he made out of his illness.
Yeah.
The wrong choice didn't come out of a choice. It came out of his brain
Yeah.
being affected by this mental illness and starting the use of an opioid, which continued to affect his brain. And I think we really want people to get that information. It's not that they're making these wrong choices and not telling the truth all the time or living in paranoia, because most of the time it's that paranoia and that which is part of psychosis that they're living in. And that is not a choice. That is something that your brain is doing that you have no control over until you get the help. And so you're standing there and, what would you want, as you said, any other parent or any other person listening right now to know that as you stood there with your son, what would you want it to tell? Because I hope that person's listening right now because I want to tell them something for you.
Well, that same boy who was standing there waiting for his sub, he was the same boy who weeks before that helped a 13-year-old runaway who was from a foster home, who was on the streets. My 17-year-old special needs boy took him under his wing. And when the police came to get the 13-year-old, they left my 17-year-old on the street. So he helped the 13-year-old.
But he didn't help your son. He didn't help your son.
So he might have looked like nothing much, but he was a lot more.
Yeah, he was, and he is a lot more, because I can just hear the kindness, and having a mom, I just hear your heart. I just hear your heart, Tammy, and I just hear, you invested in your son, and you put him in the sports, and here you are. I can just tell, the advocacy that you do, and the fact that you're having. It's not even just courage; it's just even the fortitude and the resilience to come on here and share your story today. I am so grateful. And if you need to take a breath, we can take a breath. And Angie and Sydney, you can jump in. Is there anything, as you hear the story from Kathryn and Tammy, um, that you think it's important for the public to know, and the police to know, and child services to know, so that they will have to there will be very more little Tammy moms and dads having to go through this again.
This is so
If
beyond heartbreaking. Sorry, Ange. I'll be quick. I just, my heart is absolutely broken, as would anybody listening to this story. This is the biggest injustice. Can you imagine these people that are so critical, and it's your child, what you wouldn't do to help your child? These people are sick with a disease, and it's not that dissimilar than any other disease that people are suffering with, but we see these behaviors that are unusual, and people just make all kinds of assumptions. Addictions is a pediatric disease. It has huge genetic links. It's not the fault of the person suffering, and mental health has the huge genetic links. This is not the fault of the person. These are wonderful human beings who have this enormous burden of an illness, and nobody's listening. Where's the protection of the child? And then to criticize families or keep them at arm's length when everybody is doing everything possible to help them. It's just, to me, it's just unbelievable. It's inhumane that people could treat other people in that way. And to block a parent from helping a loved one is just unimaginable.
Um, Angie, why is this happening? Like, why? What is it? And I know we won't be able to get into the full details tonight, obviously. And this will probably lead into the part 3 of the series. Why do parents have to go through this? What is in the system that is preventing a mom who wants to help from helping?
So there's many layers to the answer to that question, but I think the best answer at a high level is stigma, which is just a nice word for discrimination. If a parent kicked a child out of their house and the child was 14, 15, 16, it's our responsibility to be looking after them. It's our job to protect them. That's what our child welfare legislation says. But if the child chooses to leave the home, there's just an assumption that it's the parent's fault. So you don't need to talk to them. And the child, unfortunately, many times says, don't involve my family. And that's, so all of the systems that are supposed to protect vulnerable children, whether it's child welfare or the police or the medical community, they're frankly not doing their jobs. And part of it is our health laws and the criminalization of drug use. So it's a huge problem if the system has primarily been set up to punish people who are using drugs instead of help them. And that's the system we have today. So if, Sid said addiction's a pediatric illness. They're saying that in the States. I've yet to hear an expert here far saying it. I've yet to hear anybody else in Canada say it. What we mean by that is if you start using substances before the age of 15, you're 6 times as likely to develop a substance use disorder. And 90% of the time, substance use disorder is developing during adolescence. So it affects the young. And we have a million reports that talk about the importance of early intervention. And then our laws say, oh yeah, but parents, like, you're responsible, you should be intervening, but legally, we don't give you the right to intervene. And there you have it. And I would say, technically, mental illness isn't a communicable disease. But if you have someone in your family who's struggling with their mental health, that is going to ripple through the entire family. And before long, you've got an entire family of people with anxiety and depression or their own substance use disorders. So there's just a disrespect for the importance of family. We focus solely on the individual with substance use disorder. And when people say it's family illness, it doesn't mean everybody has substance use disorder. It means everybody in the family is going to be taken down and out by this because they love the person who is ill and they get a front row seat to sit and watch them slowly kill themselves.
And that right there is like the crux of the matter in more ways than one. And this part here is so intricate. And I hope anyone listening, you will hear many stories, and we definitely have to just sit down and unpack some of this. And so people understand how the system is really set up to fail. It is not set up to help. And we have to, there are going to be a lot of people who don't like me. And I don't care, because you are taking away the rights and our loved ones. Sometimes we talk about consent and capacity, and the fact that you have to go form a loved one for them to even get help. And the fact that you have to form them brings resentment into you. You say you want the parents to help, but when they bring them, unless you form them, you get penalized by your loved one. They don't want to talk to you anymore. Then you're seeking help and you're not getting the help. And this is the pain that parents are feeling. And if we say the opioid, we are in an opioid crisis across this country, for more ways than one. We have to really have some frank, honest conversation and start doing some advocacy at a different level. I know you may some the human rights people may not like what I have to say, but life is a right, and parents have a right. When you give birth to a child, and you're telling me that up until 18 I'm responsible for them, but then I'm not responsible for them. You can't have it both ways. It's either one or the other, and we would prefer the other, because Kathryn shared so well that it was because her parents were able to intervene for her and get her the help. That's why she can sit here today. And so we've been sharing a lot. um, we've been in a place where it's very fragile, and it's very heartbreaking, literally. And so, Kathryn and Tammy, um, I want you to share whatever you feel like, that you would want others listening to know, whether it's to, and you can speak to whomever you want to. You can speak to a politician, you can speak to a family member, you can speak to anybody who just doesn't know in society. The floor is yours as to what would you like, to say as we wind down here tonight.
I think for myself, the first thing is never give up on your kids. Never give up, no matter what. And it doesn't always mean that they can live with you. It doesn't always mean the outcome is going to be what you want. It may be, or better. But if we give up on hope, we've got nothing, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I've learned is to challenge the system. I mean, as one person, I cannot take on one system. But if each of us, one person at a time, slowly breaks through the cracks of all the faultiness within that system, then slowly we make change. And part of that is not being intimidated by the powers that be. So with the police in our neighborhood, I have befriended some of them.
Right.
And when they've done well and they've treated my son well in the Black Lives Matter era, I write a letter to their sergeant saying, this officer and this officer have a very strong, nuanced understanding of mental health and addiction. I want you to know that they're doing their job well. So that I create an ally instead of an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
They need to get built up as well, because they got a tough job with what they're doing. With psychiatrists, Angie was with me on a call with my spouse trying to get my son formed. And we had to fight hell with this guy for 15 minutes. A psychiatrist that had probably 10 years of medical training. I'm not sure how many hours of addiction within that 10-year period. I'm sure it's not very much. He did not want to admit him because he said, addiction is a choice. And Angie said, excuse me, but I'm going to have to correct you on that. If you look at the Diagnostic System Manual 5, it very clearly shows that substance use disorder is a form of mental illness. But the fact that she had to clarify that for a doctor is astounding to me. And then from the other side, you talk about having to get the person formed to get help. Even there's blocks with that. My spouse and I went to the Justice of the Peace in Newmarket trying to get our son formed. And my spouse was in tears. We had everything written out logically at what has happened. And she said, I'm sorry, we cannot admit him because according to the legal framework, addiction does not fit under the category that would qualify for him to be formed. And she said, you're probably the 10th family this week that I've had to turn away. I'm very sorry.
That she had to turn away, that she chose to turn away.
For very similar reasons, just because it doesn't qualify. But, I mean, most of these kids that are going in, it's not just about the substance abuse. It is about underlying issues or issues that come as a result of the prolonged itself.
Yes.
But it was a no-go. So we've had to find ways to be creative to work around that. I don't give up. Like, if you don't let me through the front door, I'm going to come into the back. I'm going to dig underground and come underneath the floor. I don't care. No is not an option for me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's finding allies like FAR that are there for families at no cost. And so I say to people, if you can support them through donation, I think you're charitable, right, Angie? Help them to keep them afloat so that they can be the spokespeople for us to get these laws changed. Because until the laws change, it's just going to be kvetching, as they say in Yiddish, right? We need to change the baseline. And so we need organizations like FAR. We need people like you, Nicole, that has the courage to publicize this, to get the word out, and people like Tammy and Sydney sharing their stories. That's how people's hearts and minds are changed. It's through stories. It's not facts. We need the facts, but we need the stories to make it alive, to make it real for people.
And people have to understand how hard it is to tell the stories. And it's hard on many levels because with the shame and stigma with mental health and addiction, when a family, it's your story to tell, yet it's not your story to tell. And then you have your loved one going through the challenge. And depending on where they're at in their recovery, you know, John Brown knows, okay, well, my son or daughter had an addiction, a mental health, an illness, whatever, and now they're doing well. They may be on, getting, medication, whatever. And now they go for a job. They're like, no, I can't because this person has, bipolar, and this person had schizophrenia, and this person has depression. But we don't do that when it comes to alcohol. We don't do that when it comes to cancer. We don't do that when somebody is smoking. And all those have, and alcohol and cigarettes in particular, they are addictive. We don't penalize people, and there's no stigma when you're drinking because it's this secret piece that is happening. And the shame is very different. There's judgment there when you get found out, but the judgment is very different when you're dealing with addiction and bipolar and schizophrenia. It's like, you got to think yourself better. And it's a brain disease. I'm just going to get an airplane is going, mental illness is a brain disease, people. Can we get it together and start treating it as such and start, I'm just gonna go to another place. I gotta rein myself back in. If we were sitting together, you'd be slapping me on the head saying, Nicole, okay, come back down, because we're gonna have to go in deeper and further another day. Tammy, my beloved, my new beloved sister, I'm so glad that I have met you, and your beautiful Marky Mark. And what would you like to share?
Well, I think if there was inclusivity for the parents, if the actual, like Marcus at one point had to go in the hospital. A girl had made a call to the police because he had texted something online, and she thought he was cutting. He was actually sharing pictures of someone else who was cutting. And so we were at the cottage, and she called the police and said, so when we get home, they were at my door and we had to go to the hospital. So they took him in for a crisis check. 6 hours later, we leave. I'm not apprised of anything. No one would talk to me. No one would tell me what happened. I'm just the taxi there and the taxi back, right? Parents need to be included. We need to know that they're okay, and if not, what we can do to be part of the solution. But if you're not putting us as part of the solution, there's no way to help that child. So the purpose of blocking me out of his results from a crisis check, the purpose of blocking a parent from being part of getting them off the street, is there any real purpose in that? It's just a law, and they're all following a law because that's what it says to do in our bill or law that, says cops can't intervene, cops can't put hands on, cops can't arrest them, cops can't. Well, what can cops do then? Because he's loitering, they're stealing, that they're doing something to get that money. Why can't you pull them in? When you have the opportunity, slam them in the clinker for a few nights or something, give them a scare, send them home, but do something. Instead, they leave them on the streets because they can't. Not that they don't want to, because if I wanted to, I would. And no one's going to stop me if I was a cop, and I know there's laws. But if I saw someone on the street and I was good enough on the street at my job where I was saying, hey, how's it going, Marky? You want to go have a coffee? That's not going to hurt.
Mhm.
Half the time, that's all he would have been looking for.
Yeah.
It would have just been that personal one-on-one, making him feel like he was special, would have pulled him in so much faster. Because the minute I sat with him in the park and said, you know, I think you should come home and we can work on this. And he's like, you know what, Mom, I will. I'm coming home this week. It was that reaching out and him knowing that I am in the background and I do care. They want someone who cares, and not just the parents. The people from the organizations helping should be caring. The people who are behind the badge should be caring, and they should be trained to work with these kids. If they're not trained, they should have someone with them who is trained, because when they're on the street, they're the first ones they see. I'm obviously the last one because I was only called in when his body was on the slab. And that's not cool. Not cool.
That is absolutely not cool, beloved.
Mm-mm.
It is not cool that your son the week before says, I'm wanting to come home. I want to make a change. I need the help. And there are people that are around that are not able to tell you where he is, even when you're asking for the information on the precept of privacy, etc., etc., etc. And so, Tam, please accept my heartfelt condolences from myself and everybody who listens to the show, um, on the loss of
If I
your.
might also, though,
Yes.
this didn't just affect us now, because I mean, I have sold everything, we're leaving. I have no hair, I've gained weight. But my 11-year-old boy has not spoken about his brother since last July. He will not. He remembers the ride to the hospital as a trauma now. We followed the police car, and now in school, if there's sirens, he can't be in the school. They do their drills. They tell him to leave so that he won't be there. If they do talk about drugs, he has to leave the room. Now his life, and he did nothing wrong, is affected. It affects all of us. It's huge.
That is huge. And you know what? I am going to be keeping your son in prayer. And we're going to pray that
Mhm.
he's going to be able to battle this transition, this vicarious trauma, the post traumatic stress of it all. And Angie, you said it so that all families, it affects the entire family.
Mhm.
And Sydney and Angie, before we go, is there anything else you would like to share right now? I know we have to do more um, of a deep dive into why Kathryn and Tammy have faced, and other parents, thousands, not 10 parents, thousands of parents across Canada of in this fight. What last things would you like to say before we go tonight? Who wants to go first, Angie or Sydney?
I'll go first. Um, I just, first of all, I'm grateful to Kathryn and Tammy for coming in and sharing their stories, because we can't help people without these stories, because that's, if anything, what might move the people who are in power and have the ability to fix this to do it. I would like to leave on a message of hope, because this has been a pretty heavy evening. The message of hope is, parents and family members, we can't control the outcome. Lots of good families lose people, and we can't control our loved one. But our power lies in our ability to influence, and what we say and do matters. And sometimes it's not enough, but it is something. And we, at FAR are fighting to make the changes that we need to ensure that people receive compassionate, accessible, evidence-based treatment. And I do believe things are changing, and also that people aren't criminalized. So, there are lots of people out there who recognize the problems and how the system is failing families like Tammy's and Kathryn's, and that really it's urgent that we make these changes as soon as possible.
Thank you so much, Angie. And Sydney? Hold on, I think you're on. just now. I think you're on mute. Hold on. There we go. There we go. Oh, I think I keep muting and you keep on muting. Okay, there we go. Okay, we're back. We're
You
good.
don't have to listen to stories like that. I'm just
That's
losing
okay.
it, and I'm
That's
not
okay.
great anymore. It's the courage that it takes to step forward to share stories like that is remarkable. And sadly, that's what we need to be teaching providers, politicians, the general public. I mean, what wouldn't you do for your child? It's heart-wrenching, and something has got to change, and change quick, because we're just losing too many people so unnecessarily. So I guess sort of following in Angie's footsteps and leaving with sort of a message of hope is that anybody out there that is suffering with something like this, FAR, Families for Addiction Recovery, is out there trying to help. So reach out, look for our services. We have some incredible services that may be able to support you. We have peer-to-peer trained people. They're absolutely wonderful. So you can have one-on-one ongoing conversations with someone to help with strategies, to learn more about these illnesses, to figure out what kind of influence that families do have in hopefully leading them to recovery. We have some really wonderful virtual parent group support sessions, and that's wonderful too, because you're part of a community. There's other people that are there dealing with the same issues. You're not alone, and that's really wonderful to know that. And families sharing wonderful strategies with other families. There's some great lessons that are learned in those support group meetings. And then finally, we do have a live support line. It's opened up between 1 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Eastern Standard Time. And so if you just need to reach out and talk to somebody in that moment, call us, because we have trained peer supporters that are there as well. And there's someone to talk to almost every day of the week. So reach out, know that there's hope. We need to take that horrible shame off of their shoulders and replace that with hope, because there are a lot of really happy stories of recovery that you need to know about too. So I think I would end with that reach out for the help. It's there.
Well, I'm talking my life away. I'm talking my life away, and I'm on mute. Hey, maybe I need to be muted for a minute. Oh my God. Tammy, Kathryn, Angie, Sydney, I am so humble that you joined the show tonight and shared your story, and we're so transparent. I know it's not easy. It's a very hard topic to speak about, and especially when you lose a loved one in the midst of this crisis. And we put up the information for FAR. And we've done something a little different at the Victory Speak show tonight. This is the first show that I have done that is pre recorded, and we did it. We wanted to make sure and catch everybody's schedules. And you can imagine with Angie and Sydney on the front lines working, dealing with their schedules, and with Kathryn and Tammy, just making sure we can do it. So I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. We are here live, of course, watching the show and paying attention to your comments. And if you want to know more, and if you missed the top of the show, any part of the show, please go to the Victory Speaks Instagram, YouTube page, and Victory Speaks 7. The show will be there. If you want to watch it again, if you want to share it with somebody that you need to know, if you know a person with authority, a person who has influence, whether it's in the media, wherever it is, let them know some of the truth. And if people have questions, there's a great team at FAR that can answer some of these questions and understand the roadblocks that parents and loved ones are facing to get their loved ones help. We really appreciate, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come on tonight. And we need to let our victory speak. And love is in the details. Allow us to be loving and kind to one another. And so as we end tonight, I'm going to try and do something that I've never done before. So this is the day of newness. So I'm going to share my screen, which I've done before. I'm going to play this beautiful song. Hopefully I've cued the song right. And by Kathryn Eve, who's an amazing, amazing, amazing woman. And so let's try the sharing of this screen. And see if we get. I'm just going to put a picture up on the screen so that we you're not seeing myself, because you don't need to see me on the screen while this is up. And we're going to play this song, and so you can reflect and let your victory speak tonight. Can you stay a while? Can you comfort me? Can we keep alive this sweet memory? Can I hold you close? Can I keep you safe if I leave you to heaven in return for faith? In return for faith. Holy Moses, the time has come. The river Jordan is rising higher. Go catch the sun. Holy Moses, the sky is open wide. I see a rainbow arching right before my eyes. Can you hear me pray? See the lines on my face. Can you tell your mother is in need of grace? Can you reach across that great divide? If the flood is over, why am I still drowning inside? I'm drowning inside. Holy Moses, the time has come. The river Jordan is rising higher. Go catch the sun. Holy Moses, the sky is opening wide. I see a rainbow arching right before my eyes. And so, as we wind down this evening, and in a moment of reflection, can you stay a while? Can you comfort me? Can we keep alive this sweet memory? Let's keep the memory alive of those that have transitioned from a mental health illness and addiction. Thank you for tuning in to Victory Speaks. This is Nicole Waldron, your voice of victory and your mental fitness coach. Be blessed. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight. It was a show that we recorded, and so glad that you tuned in. Tammy has been online, and Angie, and Kathryn, and Sydney. And if you hear me emotional now, because I'm still crying, this work that many do is so important. And I really hope you hear through the stories tonight the hearts of Tammy, the hearts of Kathryn, the hearts of Sydney, and of Angie. This is the second part in our series. Last week we had Louise on, who is the co-founder with Angie of FAR. And, you know, Vivian, you ask, what are we going to do? I don't know, but I know we have to advocate, and we have to fight, and we have to share the stories, and we have to share the truth of what's happening to our loved ones and why they're dying on the streets in the thousands. And the system has been set up to fail, even though people are speaking about mental health and wellness and they're speaking about the opioid crisis. We need to remember that there's so much being done to hinder the health and wellness of our loved ones. So I'm going to keep on doing this show. I'm going to keep on speaking as much as I can and where I can find you education. If you want to share your story, be sure to let me know. Thank you once again for tuning into this broadcast. This is Nicole Waldron, your voice of victory, your mental fitness coach. Be blessed tonight and hold your loved ones closer. Angie, I thank you. Um, we got to do better and just share. Let the truth come out, and the truth will set many free. Good night. God bless.